Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. This is one of the most controversial jets ever built. Not only is it the result of more than a decade of development and the successor to the legendary Flanker, but the West already claim it's just a copycat. It's a 5th generation state-of-the-art Russian stealth jet that apparently isn't stealth, and it's the future of the Russian Air Force, but they haven't managed to build more than 24. Controversial indeed. But it's possible that this aircraft is more than just a fluke. Is it just all Western propaganda? Or is it really a future dangerous underestimation of an adversary? Today, let's explore the history, the myths, and the truth behind the future of the Russian Air Force and their attempt at a stealth fighter, the felon from the East, the Su-57. In the 1980s, there was one type of new aircraft that was hot, and that was a stealth plane. The Americans took this in their stride and developed the ATF program that led to what we know today as the F-22 Raptor. But what if I told you that the F-22 Raptor isn't actually a stealth jet? Contrary to popular belief, stealth doesn't mean invisible to the radar. It means that the enemy radar, either an aircraft or on the ground, won't be able to detect and achieve a lock on the target in time. And this is the key word. The B-2 was designed as a bomber that would be able to slip between Soviet air defenses, limiting their range, and the F-22 Raptor was designed as a first strike air dominance fighter that could secure the airspace before the enemy could get missile lock. But the Russians, when encountering this technology, had other things in mind. They believed that the aircraft should have a higher performance first and stealth second. This led to their 5th gen jet program called the MFI, which was aimed at a high performance aircraft with some degree of radar cross-section minimization. It eventually gave birth to the MiG-144, which failed miserably, due to Russia as a whole failing miserably in the 90s. But the rejection in the MFI program led the Sukhoi Bureau to put their money where their mouth was and make their own futuristic fighter called the S-37 Berku. This self-funded aircraft aimed to become a technological demonstrator for the ideal future of the Russian Air Force and show the powers in charge what they could do. You know, the famous forward-swept wing design we all flew in Ace Combat. And this inspired the nation to try again. The Russian government, after the failure of the MFI program in the early 2000s, started a new program called the PAC-FAR, or Prospective Air Force Complex of Fighter Aviation. Yes, it's a very weird name, I know. Sukhoi was chosen without competition because they had the experience, proved to be able to develop a prototype with their own funding due to good export performance in the 90s and 2000s, and well that the MiG's future wasn't really that bright. And Sukhoi, seeing all the drama around the F-22 being a stealth fighter, wanted to give it a good hot crack. And this is where the story of the Su-57 begins. This fighter jet was supposed to be the future of the Russian Air Force, but its subsequent production has hit many delays. You might think that the engineers must be so frustrated to see so few of their dream aircraft take to the sky, something that you as a business owner might feel the same about your sales. But unlike the Russian Air Force, this is something that we can fix with the Squarespace website. But hold on, don't skip this part as I'll have some sneak peeks for future videos. So how can Squarespace help you? It starts with a best-in-class website template that you can customize every design detail with reimagined drag and drop technology for desktop and mobile, so it's both sites in one. You can stretch your imagination online with the Squarespace Fluid Engine built in and ready to go. But that's not all, because every Squarespace website also has built-in shops to start selling right away, or you can use the campaign marketing tools to start driving business instantly. Seriously, Squarespace is the secret weapon that I use for my own online store, where you can get this seriously sick posters at www.fountainexplain.shop. Thanks, Squarespace. Now, when we make these videos, they do rely on sponsors like Squarespace, so by supporting the channel and seeing more videos just like this, I'm also able to give you 10% off your first site and domain by going to www.squarespace.com/found. For everybody who clicks that link down below and starts a site, thanks so much. For years, the new Russian 5th Gen fighter was under the veil of secrecy and the main topic of discussion on forums, military blogs, and in the news. But in 2010, we finally saw the first pictures and the first videos of this new fighter called the T-50 taking off from the airfield and performing its first flight. The media went crazy, saying it's just an F-22 copycat, that it's so bad it's good, but the truth is that it was somewhere in between. So I'm going to show you exactly why the Su-57 was a beast of its own. And let's start with the obvious comparison. The Su-57 does follow the wing design of the American 5th Gen fighters, but this is where the similarities actually stop. Unlike the F-22 or F-35, the Su-57 follows the similar design of flankers, with engines located in gondolas and a tunnel between them to increase the maneuverability and lift performance. The vertical stabilizers of the Su-57 are canted, which is the main requirement of any stealth aircraft to minimize its radar return, but they're also used as a whole as a control surface, similar to the YF-23 design. Yes, that's right, the rejected YF-23 that the Americans didn't choose when they were looking at the F-22 program. And it's this jet that the Su-57 is actually much more inspired by than the Raptor. The nose section closely resembles not just the YF-23, but much more the NATF-23 concept, which was based off the YF-23 prototype, and we've done a whole video on the channel about this crazy Navy variant. The Su-57 kept the horizontal stabilizers and added LERX control surfaces, or leading edge route extensions, which can be used as sort of canards in flight, again with maneuverability top of mind. But this is where it gets a little weird. From the first prototype onwards, one notable design choice was the regular thrust vectoring nozzles and exposed titanium of its AL-41 engines. But I'll get back to why that's weird later. Another problem with the engine placement is the not fully hidden compressor blades inside the S ducts, even though the Su-47 had them hidden. Speculations about the actual stealth performance of the Su-57 started to flare up right away, with some people questioning that this design was even remotely comparable to the F-35 or the F-22 when it came to stealth. So let's squash that bug right now. The kind people at Aircraft 101 did an amazing work to settle the question of stealth once and for all. They created some highly detailed 3D models of some famous modern aircraft and then used mathematical model and radar scattering simulations to get the data of radar cross-sections over the wide range of frequencies. Meanwhile, a leaked document for the Su-57 stealth design patent actually stated that it has an RCS of 0.1 to 1 meter squared. This is much more than the F-35's 0.00015 or the F-22's 0.0001 meter squared, meaning that the Russian jet has the stealth characteristics of a brick wall. These numbers proved correct, however, there was a caveat, and trust me, we're about to get really technical, but it's the devil in the details. If we were to examine the results from the Aircraft 101, which does not include the effect of RAM materials, which can't be calculated with precision, the Su-57 has a median radar cross-section of 0.48 meters squared in a frontal 120 degrees. This coincides with the Russians' leaked report. However, an F-35's median RCS stands at 0.06 meters squared. So if we take a look at the diagram, it shows a very slight angle of which the F-35's radar cross-section drops to negative 35 or 0.0001 meters squared, but that's the minimal RCS, not the overall frontal RCS of the aircraft. So if you take into account the addition of RAM materials, and this paper on RAM material simulations can decrease the radar cross-section up to 90% when the whole object is covered in these materials. But here's the thing, the F-35 or any other jet is not covered in these materials. They only use it on the hatches or important sections where the radar waves might scatter back to the source. So a decrease in the median RCS can go anywhere between 20 to 90%, but not the 200 or 1000% that people have claimed. The bottom line is that there's no chance that the Su-57 can match the stealth characteristics of the F-35s or F-22s, but it's not as far for them as the media wants you to believe. Any modern radar would have trouble detecting and tracking a sub 1 meter squared target, so in the eyes of the Russians, it's stealthy enough. Although I do want to just draw back to those strangely exposed engines. On the side or back section of the Su-57, the radar cross-section is probably much higher than its American counterparts because of those engine issues. And then of course we have the famous exposed screws with the Su-57, but this is not a key factor because, well, as you could see, both the F-35 and F-22 also have exposed screws, and they are both still extremely stealthy aircraft. But it's the stealth that isn't the biggest issue with the Su-57, it's actually those engines. The Russians made the same mistake that put to trash so many projects throughout the Cold War. They started development of this jet without its new engines. Now that's not really a bad idea per se. I mean, the Rafale and the Su-27 and many other successful jets flew their first flight without engines designed for them, but that was a flaw that was quickly fixed. The Su-57 on the other hand still doesn't have its proper engines. The development of Dahlia 30 is a long and still not concluded story, and the serial production of the Su-57s fly with AL-41F1 engines similar to the ones used on the Su-35. And these are great engines, don't get me wrong. However, even though they are designed as supercruise capable engines for the MFI program, the ones inside the original Su-57 are not based on the original AL-41Fs because they were too large for the Phelon, and instead they're based on the older AL-31s, meaning the Su-57 might not be able to achieve supercruise in a full combat load, as the Su-35 can only achieve it in a light configuration. Yikes. Now the cool thing is about these AL-47s is that they have 3D thrust vectoring, giving the Su-57 amazing maneuverability, as well as the thrust to weight ratio over 1 with combat load, making it a beast for dogfighting. But this isn't the era of dogfighting, and this scenario is highly unlikely in modern combat. Sorry, Tom Cruise. The new Dahlia 30 or AL-51 engines are supposed to have the supercruise ability at Mach 1.5, serrated nozzles like the F135 engine on the F-35, and the ability to eliminate the exposed titanium area and maybe even more flat, more stealthy design as seen on the S-70 drone. But when exactly that's going to happen remains to be seen. Oh, you didn't know this aircraft comes with its own drones? This is where it gets really cool. What could really give the edge to the Su-57 is the use of a wingman-style drones such as the S-70. And unlike the Su-57 with all of its issues, the S-70 is much more designed with stealth in mind, and its size gives it the ability to carry some serious ordnance. Paired with the Su-57, it could be the perfect protection or attacking force where the Su-57 or an AWACS aircraft could spot the targets for the drones and let them go forward so they can gauge with the enemy completely unseen. Along with these drones and their Su-57, Russia is also developing something called the OSNOD, a new data link system, the equivalent to the Link 16 in NATO, that would allow for such military drone operations. The S-70 has already performed several test flights and is deep in the development phase, so it's not a paper project. But the war in Ukraine and the state of the Russian armed forces afterwards begs the question, where exactly are they going to find the money to fund all of these prospective but far-fetched projects? So it's taken me 13 minutes into today's video to get to the real issue with this project: money. Originally, India partnered up with Russia in 2007 to help finance the development of the new fighter, in return to get their own two-seater variant and the license to build this new jet at home. The development of the T-50 prototype and the PACFAR program as a whole suffered numerous delays and issues due to the engine and the completely new avionics with the radar, sensors, etc. that was supposed to go into this aircraft. And so the Indians, rightly so, got fed up with it in 2018. They exited the project with the option to buy a finished aircraft in future if Russia ever got around to mass producing it and it entered service within the Russian Air Force. But this is where it gets dicey. Russia dropped their initial plan of 200 of these fighters all the way just to one squadron of 12. Talk about a decrease. But this was soon changed with the first contract for 76 aircraft being signed in 2017. But this delivery has been extremely slow, and so far only around 10 plus airframes are in operational service. The Su-57 was allegedly used both in Syria for testing and in the war in Ukraine in an air-to-air battle, and even apparently scored a kill against the Ukrainian Su-27. But all of that is in the realm or might have not, and because this war is a fully fledged battle of propaganda from day one, spinning a yarn that the Su-57 was an amazing aircraft in the heat of battle would be an incredibly successful image for Russian customers. So again, that's me telling you to take this all with a grain of salt. Now to answer the very big question that's on your mind: what would exactly happen if the Su-57 went toe-to-toe with America's best, the F-22 Raptor, or perhaps the F-35? Well, I hope you're strapped in, because we're gonna go into the real nitty and gritty detail, and we'll start with its electronics and weaponry. The Su-57 is equipped with the new AESA radar called the N036 Beleka, which is actually made up of 5 different antennas. The main antenna operates in the X-band and it is used to lock onto enemy targets and engage, as well as detect enemies on long distances. There are 2 side antennas that also operate in the X-band, but with a shorter range, giving the aircraft much better coverage around 270 degrees. And there's another 2 antennas on the wings that are operating in the lower L-band frequency, and they're used as part of the electronic warfare system. Yes, that's right, this aircraft is digital. At the front of the canopy is a system called the IRST, which allows for detection of thermal signatures of enemy aircraft and the use of IR-guided missiles without using the radar. It's the same as the one of the EOTS functions on the F-35, and something that the F-22 Raptor lacks, but it might get it in an upgrade soon. Now, the Su-57 does have sensor fusion and a computer working on all of the collected data to give situational awareness to the pilot, similar to the DAS on the F-35, but it is certainly inferior to the unparalleled situational awareness that the F-35 pilot has with that amazing helmet and DAS system. One big issue of the Su-57 is the lack of an interrogated targeting pod like the F-35. The F-35, on the other hand, can use its internal systems for targeting ground-based targets, so it still remains stealthy. To sum it all up, the Su-57 is quite capable platform with some issues which place it behind its Western counterparts in some aspects, but it is way beyond any 4th or 4th++ gen aircraft in the market, and any 5th gen fighter development as well, so it's truly something to be reckoned with. But what about the future of this program? As we explained in the video, the Su-57, although not perfect, still has a very powerful radar and avionics, decent stealth capability, and great engines. Well, sometime soon if they come along. The planned Su-57M update will feature them, at least because drones and other stuff is still in the sci-fi domain, to be honest. But neither of these Western jets would be able to detect the Su-57 in time if they're in combat, because it's also capable of carrying the R-37M long-range missiles and firing them from at least 200 kilometers away. Russia plans to use the Su-57 as a team leader of several jets to provide surveillance and support in combat. Although all of this is very nice in theory, the issue is there is only about 10 to 15 Su-57s built. Even with that whole first batch of 76 delivered, that's not enough to counter even the single F-22 fleet, and definitely not the 1,000 strong F-35 fleet in both the US and NATO. Ironically, all of this discussion about who would win makes me think that we're looking in the wrong direction. The Chinese J-20 is a way bigger threat to the US because it is actually in serial production, unlike the Su-57. And given the state of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine right now, time will tell. For all we know that this is one hell of a good-looking bird, and that its claim of being a stealth aircraft is as real as those engines. And even though some people say that it's obsolete, I think that this aircraft, along with the F-22 design, will shape many future aircraft and maybe even whole generations to come. I hope you guys and that one girl enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you soon in the next episode of Found and Explained.